All right, so thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Stephanie Garner, and I am the program coordinator at Down Syndrome Indiana, and we are really excited that you're joining us for this session of our annual conference and our presentation today by Heather Dane. Heather is the Family Engagement Specialist for the Bureau of Developmental Disability Services. And she's going to be talking about setting the stage for the future. And before we get going, I do just want to say a quick thank you to the sponsors for our conference about special kids: Family Voices Indiana, Mass Mutual Midwest, and Mr. Gordon Holmes, and Shepherd's College. And our sponsor highlight today is Mass Mutual Midwest and Mr. Gordon Holmes, and his contact information is here. Please don't forget to visit our exhibitors, and you can find our exhibitors at www.dsndiana.org/virtual-exhibit-hall. Most of our exhibitors have a short video clip that you can watch that tells you about their organization and things that you might want to know, or things that you would ask if you went to visit them at a typical exhibit expo. And without further ado, Heather, I will hand things over to you. Thank you so much. And folks, if you have questions during Heather's presentation today, she did say that you're welcome to ask as we go along, or you can type those questions in the chat box, and I will be happy to read those out for her. So thank you, Heather.
All right, thank you, Stephanie. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. So today, the title of my presentation is Setting the Stage for the Future. And so what I'm going to do is talk about the life course framework and how you can use that as your guide to setting the stage for your own future, or for someone you support, or even your child with a disability. So I want to introduce myself first. So my name is Heather Dane, obviously, and first and foremost, I'm a mom. So I am a mom to Joseph and Mikayla. Joe is the little guy on your screen in front of the red door. So he would be 16. Joseph passed away about 4 years ago, and he had multiple disabilities and health conditions. But he was one of the coolest kids you would have ever met. He made connections with people without ever speaking a word. He had a great sense of humor. He, was very social, just really cool kid. So we miss him terribly, and he taught me a whole lot. And then I have Mikayla, who is my feisty little 10-year-old. Well, she'll be 10 tomorrow. And so she also has multiple disabilities and health conditions that are similar to her brother's, but they affect her a little differently. And so she has some communication, kind of a handful of words, but she is definitely a really good self-advocate, is what I say. She is good at expressing her wants and needs, and making sure that people know exactly what it is she's trying to say, even if it's not coming out through verbal words. So, so they are my why. They are why I do everything. They are always present in my mind and my work, and in everything I do. So I am also the Family Engagement Specialist with the Bureau of Developmental Disabilities. And so if you're not familiar with us at BEADS, we administer the home and community-based waivers, so family support waiver, community integration habilitation waiver. We also administer group homes. So when the Bureau had adopted the life course framework as kind of their setting values and guide, they had determined part of the life course is really talking about how families and individuals with disabilities should be a part of those conversations, and be a part of policy change, and any kind of things that decisions that are being made at a state policy level. And so they thought it would be great to bring someone in who has that lived experience, and I was fortunate enough that they chose me to be that person. So it's been a really great opportunity to kind of share my personal experience, as well as some of my professional experiences that I've had in the past. I worked in advocacy for many years prior to this. So I've talked to many families over the years with a wide range of disabilities, I've seen the issues, the systemic issues, not with just bead services, but also with all the other services that we encounter in our lives and are trying to navigate and manage. So it's been really great to be able to kind of give that perspective and that feedback at a state level. So in addition to that, I am also a life course ambassador. And I am now, as of this year, the state facilitator. And so what that means is I went through kind of a special training to become an ambassador. So I've got some in-depth training about the life course. And then what I do is I work throughout the state with anybody and everybody who wants to learn more about life course and about how we can make this, these ideas and these values and these principles really just part of how services are delivered, but also, how families and individuals and all those people that support them think about how do we live our best life and how do we put people with disabilities in charge of their own life. So, when we adopted the life course framework, it's been about 5 years ago, we became part of this national community of practice, really whose goal was to build these state systems and policies and practices that support individuals who have, or support families that have an individual with IDD kind of across the lifespan. So, from birth to death, and no matter what service you're touching, that really we're kind of building this capacity and this knowledge base where we are all kind of working towards how do we meaningfully include people with disabilities so that they're not just there, but they are actually a part of their community. How do we give them a voice to lead their own lives? And how do we create some supports that really support them to do that? So at DDARS, which is the Division of Disability and Rehabilitative Services, which is kind of my mother agency of BEADS. So their mission is that all people are empowered to live, love, work, learn, play, and pursue their dreams. So when I go through the life course, you'll see their basic core principle, life course's basic core principle is this exact same thing, but at the end it says in the community. And so at DDARS, they chose to drop the in community part because they didn't feel like community should be a special place. So community is really for everyone. I don't call up my girlfriends and say, hey, you want to go out in the community today? I call them and say, let's go get a cup of coffee, or do you want to go see a movie? And so people with disabilities are no different. Community shouldn't be something special that they do. It should just be part of what they access and that they are part of their community wherever it is that they live. So I'm going to kind of give you some basics about the life course, and then we're going to talk about how you can use some of these just for your own life and your own planning for the future. So life course starts with the individual. And this is the individual with a disability. But I should also say, even though I kind of direct this about people with disabilities, this is really a universal framework that can be used for anybody. It can be used for you, me, the neighbor next door, whether you touch disability or not. This is a framework that can be used for everybody. So it starts with the individual, and all individuals are a part of a family unit. So family units can look very different, and how you define family can look different. And so life course makes sure that people recognize that family can be biological family. It might be friends who are like your family. It may be, your neighbors may be more like your family than your biological family are, and that's okay. And also recognizing that we all have our own experiences as a family, our own cultural beliefs and traditions, and all of those things should be embraced and recognized and be part of the conversation of when we were talking about what it is that that individual wants for their best life. So then they start thinking about what makes up a good life. And typically over the years, when we talked about disability services, we only talk about health and safety. You know, what are those things that we need to put in place to keep that person healthy and safe? And so while that is extremely important, we forgot about all the other pieces of life that make up a whole life, right? That make us happy, that make us feel fulfilled. And so we forgot to start talking about and thinking about, you know, how are people spending their days? Who are their friends? How are they practicing their faith if they have one? How are they advocating for themselves, and what are we doing to support them to do that? You know, and then when we talked about healthy living, you know, we forgot to talk about mental health and, you know, just general wellness kind of things that really affect all of our health overall. And then community living, which is, you know, kind of thinking about where do we live, where do we want to live, what's kind of access do we have to the community. So I'll talk a little more about each of those life domains here in just a moment, but it really is trying to be holistic in the approach and thinking about all of these things at the same time, and how do we build a very full life, and how do we meet needs that all of us have, whether you have a disability or not, and that we're not forgetting certain pieces of a person's life. And then they talk about the 3 buckets of support. So they say, you know, we are surrounded by these 3 buckets of support. So it's discovery, navigation, connecting and networking, and goods and services. So this is really, you know, kind of about how do we how do we find out things? How do we connect to people? How do we get information? And so, you know, that discovery and navigation piece may be, you know, you just got a diagnosis. And so you're kind of learning about the diagnosis and trying to just figure out, what does this new world mean? And what is life going to look like? And through that discovery, then you start to connect and network. You may connect to places like Down Syndrome Indiana, or other family members, or you know, any kind of advocacy organization. So, you know, you start to kind of make these connections and network, and then you start to recognize those goods and services that may be available that you can access to kind of assist you to get to your best life. So then when you're thinking about those goods and services and that connecting and networking, and how are we going to get these needs met, everyone accesses support through multiple ways. So, and this is what's called integrated support. And so they look at things like personal strengths and assets. And we're going to talk a lot more about the integrated supports as well. But, you know, looking at personal strengths and assets, frequently we forget to talk about, what does that person or family bring to the table? What strengths do they have that we can build upon? And because they have something to contribute as well. What relationships are in our life, and how do we build upon those? What technology do we use? What are the community-based services or organizations or activities that are out there that we participate in? And then what are the eligibility specific, which are, you know, those things that you gain because you are eligible for that for one reason or another, whether that's disability or income, or, you know, any of the multiple things that can make you eligible for a program based upon their criteria. So then we start thinking about, with all of these things, the trajectory of our life. And so where are we headed? What is it that we want? What is our vision of a good life? And we're going to talk a lot more about the trajectory as well. And what are those things that can get us there? And then finally, they talk about and break it down by life stage, which is really nice. And so it really starts to recognize and think about, where are we in our life stage, and where are we going, and what are those experiences that we've had that may affect the decisions that we're making today and in the future. And so, you know, what's nice about this as well is that, so for me, you know, who has a 10-year-old daughter who has a disability, I can be looking at school age kind of considerations for her, but I can also be looking at adulthood considerations for me, and how does that affect me and the decisions I make for parenting for her. So this is especially helpful for grandparents, considering what are those needs and things that they have as an aging individual who is caring for a school age child, or or someone who's transitioning to adulthood. So it can look at the entire family, and really kind of recognizing where they are, where they're headed, and what those experiences that they've had in the past, how that affects them now. So thinking across the life domains. So those are the things that I was talking about earlier, where we really were trying to get away from the idea of, how do we keep people safe? Well, we don't want to get away from the idea of how do you keep people safe, but getting away from that's the only thing that we consider. So, everyone, life is messy. Nothing really fits well in one category necessarily for the same person. So, we may all define these things a little differently for how they look for us individually, but these are just kind of some broad categories to really kind of prompt you to start thinking about, how am I thinking about preparing for putting in place all the things to kind of feed all of these life domains so that the individual has a very full and meaningful life. So daily life and employment is, kind of those, like, how do you spend your day? Do you go to school? Do you have a job? Do you volunteer? But also, what are those routines that you rely on to have a successful day? What are those skills that you have that get you through the day? What are your communication level? And those things that you need to communicate to those around you. So really thinking about, how do you spend your day? What is it that's involved to really help you get through the day successfully? And where do I want to be? Is there somewhere else is there something else I want to be doing or want to get to when I start thinking about my daily life, and whether that's employment or school or retirement? I mean, it can be any of those kinds of things. So then community living is really thinking about where and how you live. And so this can be housing and living options. It can be home adaptations that you may need, or modifications that you may need to be able to get in and out of your house and around your house safely. But it can also be, what kind of access do you have to the community? Frequently, especially for individuals who live in small towns, when we start talking about and thinking about what are some things that you can be doing out in the community, the YMCA is a frequent suggestion. And so YMCAs are great, but if you live in a community where the closest YMCA is 45 minutes away and there's no public transportation and you don't drive, then it's really not accessible. So it's really, it's also thinking about where it is you live and what that community looks like, what kind of access you have, and what kind of transportation options do you have or do you need. And that may even be special transportation options that you need, as far as like ramps or lifts and those kinds of things. Social and spirituality is really, these are the things that I always say are kind of like, that's what feeds your soul. So, these are your friends, those relationships, those things that you do that bring you joy. In here is listed your faith community, but keep in mind, faith communities and spiritual communities can be very different for lots of different people. So it doesn't necessarily have to be church. It could be meditation or, things like that, of where you kind of find that spirituality that you are searching for and enjoy. So, really think about, how are we building that social capital? Who is it that's in our life? And what are those things we can do to kind of build those even more, if that's something we would like. Healthy living is, so again, this isn't just physical health, but this is also, kind of behavioral health, mental health, thinking about nutrition and access to nutrition and just kind of general wellness. And it's also, what is your access to affordable healthcare? And how do you, are you able to do that? Are you able to afford and get to and have a primary care physician or specialist or any of those kinds of things that you need to kind of live a healthy life? Safety and security is that, those things that we think about a lot. So, what are those things that we do to keep people safe and secure? Emergency plans. We talk about legal rights and guardianship options and alternatives. Just kind of general well-being, but really thinking about what are those things that that person needs to be safe and secure. And then advocacy and engagement is how are we empowering people to make their own choices, to have some responsibility for their own goals and ownership of those goals? How are we helping them to become a leader in their relationships, in their community, possibly even like provide some peer supports, and really recognizing that everyone, no matter if you have a disability or not, has a valued role. And so everyone has something to contribute to their family, to their neighborhood, to their community, to their world. And so really recognizing and building upon those valued roles. So, so thinking of all of those things and all those domains and all those things that we want and need to kind of live our good life, then we can start talking about, so what is it that is our vision for a good life? And what are those, this is the trajectory that you see on your screen. And so there are lots of different versions of this trajectory on the website, which I will share at the end. I'll have it on your screen at the end of this presentation so you can get on there. And so there's lots of different versions of this, but basically, it really is to help us think about what is it that we want? What is our good life? And what are those things that we don't want? Because, when you start thinking about your trajectory and where you want to be, and whether you're doing that for your child or for yourself, or even in conjunction with your child, that you're doing it together, everybody, kind of has these goals and ideas in mind of what they want to be when they grow up. And I think I'm pushing 45 and I'm still kind of figuring out what I want to be when I grow up. But, like starting to think about and list those things. There's lots of different ways we can use the trajectory, but, what is it that's your vision? Not what someone else has told you should do or be, but what is it that you want? And thinking about what are some opportunities and experiences that we can put in place that help kind of move you towards that vision. But it also helps you by saying what it is you don't want. And sometimes when I did this, especially for my daughter Mikayla, when I did this, it was so much easier to start off with what I don't want. I mean, I knew exactly what I didn't want for her. And then when I started putting down the things I wanted for her, you start to kind of hear the naysayers sometimes in the back of your mind. And, the people who have always said, well, she will never, or, the diagnosis may not allow. And so I pushed all of that aside and said, you know what, I'm going to say, this is what my vision for her is, and this is what we're going to work towards. And we may have to adjust that vision as life and circumstances change. But that's true for all of us. And so it really kind of empowered me to say, these are the things we're going to do. I don't care if you say they're possible or not. These are the things we're going to work towards, and we'll adjust it as we need to. And that's okay, because that's the way we all are. And so, really kind of putting this trajectory together, kind of creating this vision. You might have it in your mind, kind of what you want, but when you start putting it pen to paper, it really becomes very powerful. And it really, it can be a really good motivator as to like, okay, now I figured out what it is I want. Now let's talk about how we can get there. So, having this kind of positive trajectory and putting these things in place, really kind of help you with those outcomes. So, a lot of times as a parent of a child with a disability, you get all this, well, you need to do this therapy, or you need to be part of this service, or, you need to do this camp. But no one ever really talks about the why. Why do I want to do those things? Yes, I want her to walk and we're walking, but really why? Like, what is it, what is walking going to do for her? And that's a very basic example, but really thinking about kind of getting a little deeper. And so, these positive outcomes are the things that we all want. We want friends, we want, a family, we want to drive our own life, we want to live in our community, we want to, we want to have economic sufficiency, all of these things that we all want. So really the trajectory kind of helps us towards those positive life outcomes. And then really even identifying those things that you don't want. And, how do we stop from getting there? So you can use the trajectory for lots of different ways for positive pathways. So this is one of the really great things about Life Course, and sometimes can be one of the hard things about Life Course, because you can make it do whatever you want. And so sometimes people feel a little overwhelmed and lost in the beginning, like, it's just too open. So, feel free to narrow it down. If you are in a stage where you are transitioning from, high school to adulthood, it's a good time to say, okay, this is a really good time to say for that high schooler to say, these are the things that I want out of my life. And even for mom and dad to do a separate one, these are the things that they think, they want for their child. And then kind of using that as a conversation of, what are those, how do we get there? What are some commonalities and what are some differences? And it's really good, because I can tell you probably when I was leaving high school, what I would say I want was probably different than what my parents would say they wanted for me. And so, both of those things really kind of came into play with how I moved forward with my life and my transition into adulthood. So you can use it for, some transitions. You can use it very kind of, sorry, I had a loss for words, but, very specific issues. So like a school year. So if, your child is going into the 6th grade, this is what I want for their 6th grade year. You can use it for, I'm having this certain physical health condition. And so I really want to focus on what is it that I want for my physical health, or what is it that I want for my mental health. And then you can also use it for kind of situational things. What is my vision for a good job? What is my vision for a good marriage? Those kinds of things. I've done it for my job as well, and I used it as part of my performance reviews. Like, this is what I want out of a job, this is what I don't want, and this is how I see my position fitting into my vision for my good life, or my good work life. So I was going to share with you just a little bit about Mikayla's trajectory. So this is my Mikayla, and I have done this for her. This one is a little older, but it's still really relevant. And so this is my idea of my vision for her good life. And so as she gets older, and her communication, I've had her a part of all of these conversations, I want to say, but as she grows and as she gets older, she's going to be a bigger part of this conversation. So a lot of these things will probably change. This may be my trajectory for her, but it's not necessarily her own trajectory. But she will have her own, and she kind of does right now. It's just, it looks very different. So, when I started thinking about all the things I want for her, I just started listing anything that I would want for any child of mine, right? I want them to have healthy relationships. I want them to live independently. I want them to have gainful employment, but I also want her to have, the ability to advocate for her own wants and needs. I want her to make her own choices for herself. Communication is a big struggle for us. And so, my vision for her is that we have kind of figured out and perfected some type of effective form of communication for her. that she has really bad seizures. And so, that her seizures are controlled, that we have some control over those. So, I really just kind of thought about what are all those things that I want for her? And then what is it that I don't want? And this wasn't necessarily the exact opposite. You'll see some of them are, but some of them are not. Obviously, I don't want her living in poverty. I don't want her living in an institutional setting. I don't ever want her to feel isolated or segregated. I don't want her only relationships to be family or people who are paid to be with her. I don't want her health, her physical and her mental health, to not be good and to be unstable. So I don't want her to be victimized or feel unsafe. So I started listing all those things we don't want. And so once you do that, once you start listing, these are the things I want and these are the things I don't want, you can start thinking about what are those life experiences that you can start putting into place to get you there. And, a lot of these things are going to be those normal types of experiences that everyone has. And I would encourage you not to shy away from those. So, because there are a lot of opportunities there for learning. And so even if they're not great experiences, we've learned something from that. I put Mikayla on the school basketball team because she really liked basketball. And I thought, boy, this would be a great way for her to really connect more with her friends and other people or other kids in other classes. She could build her skills. Like, I've seen all these great things that could come from it. And it didn't go well, and it wasn't anybody's fault. It was just, I learned there were some things we didn't put in place that we probably should have, that what I thought she needed was not really what she needed. And so rather than saying, well, we're never going to do anything like that again, we've taken that as a learning opportunity. So really, thinking about what are those experiences that you can be putting in place. Some of these may be big experiences, some of them may be very little. Chores, giving your kids chores. So, I always say you can't expect when someone turns 18 to be able to automatically know how to do their laundry if we haven't taught them how to do their laundry the whole time. So, those chores and learning that responsibility and having that valuable input as a family member, that you're giving as part of that household and part of the family, as part of the family, you learn things from that. You learn some of those independent living skills, which are going to be so important if she's ever going to move out of my house. And, but it also kind of gives her it helps her feel valued, and it builds her self-esteem. So, and so really thinking about that and allowing for making mistakes, and teaching your kids and even, adults with disabilities, the value of learning to say no. All too often, we are constantly thinking about behaviors and how do we manage behaviors and how do we kind of help our kids to be more compliant, quote unquote compliant. And so, but there is value in teaching them also when it is appropriate to say no, that you don't always say yes to someone, to an authority figure, because sadly enough, we know that there are going to be circumstances where individuals, where we all have to know when and how to say no. So really kind of giving them some of those opportunities and experiences to do that. So when I was thinking about Mikayla's vision of the things I want for her and the things I don't want for her, this is one part of the trajectory where in the trajectory piece, you can list past experiences and future experiences. So you can list the things that you've done that have worked well, and you can list the things that maybe you need to continue to do or add in to help either get you there or keep you away from those things that you don't want to do. So this is a picture of Mikayla watering our flowers out front. And so, this is just one of her quote unquote chores. I don't call them chores with her. I always say, come on, it's time to help me go water the flowers. But it is part of that, those daily living skills, those valued roles, giving her something to do that is that she contributes to the household and making her part of the household. But also it allowed me, when I started thinking about some past experiences that haven't worked well, one of the things I said is that I didn't want her to seizures, or that I didn't want her behaviors, or, her emotions to kind of overrun her, right? I wanted her to have some emotional stability. And so when I started thinking about some of the past experiences in regards to that, really for seizure control, she has been over medicated at times because they were so bad. And that really contributed to, her behaviors and her ability to even manage her own emotions. And so, I was able to list that. And then it also will allow me to, and do it in another one, I could list those medications that didn't work that I know we never want to touch again. But it also, allowed me to think about, if I don't want her to be isolated or segregated from her community, that, I said one of the things I didn't want was for her to only participate in special programs. And so there are places, there are great special programs that she does participate in, but I didn't want those to be her only experiences. I wanted her to have, experiences that every child has, and with her peers. So this really, I know it's probably hard to read because I just have lots of things in there, but it really kind of allowed me to start thinking about and putting into place what are those things that I can start doing now to get us towards that. And what it also did is it allows me to communicate with someone who may be taking care of her, or who I use this to communicate with the school about why I want her in a general education program, or in a general education classroom, why I was so dead set against her being in a self-contained classroom. And so it allowed me to communicate those things to them in a way that really kind of made sense, and that wasn't confrontational, but it really kind of allowed them to see what I wanted for her and how I saw general education fitting into that bigger vision. So then when you start thinking about, okay, so I've figured out my vision, figured out what I don't want, I've listed some experiences that could get me there, and then you can start thinking about what are those supports that I need to really kind of help me live my best life. So everyone accesses a variety of supports to live their best life. And so Life Course breaks it down into these 5 different. So, even for me to come to work today, I have accessed every single one of these areas, to make me successful in my day. So, for technology is, what are those kind of personal or assistive or adaptive technologies? So this morning, I used my alarm clock and my coffee maker that was already set to brew when my alarm clock went off this morning, because I have to have coffee first thing in the morning. What are my personal strengths? And so, I was able to get out of bed and get myself ready. And, I'm very motivated and very task oriented and work focused. And so I use those skills to be a better employee, right, with my day. Relationships. So I'm still working remotely. We all work, or we all have relationships in our life, and how do we use those? And so I'm still working remotely. And so and Mikayla is at home. And so what I have done is I have left her with her staff member, and I come to my parents' house. I bring all of my stuff to my parents' house, so that way I can work uninterrupted. So I'm using that relationship of my parents to kind of meet that need for me to be able to focus on my work day. Eligibility specific. So like I said, I'm using one of our staff members for a waiver service for participant assistance and care, who is over there kind of taking care of her, making sure her needs are met, working towards some of her goals, so that I can do what I need to do. And then community-based, are those things that those places, groups, services, resources that everybody uses. So, you know, like I said, I'm really into, I like my coffee in the morning. So driving through and, you know, getting Dunkin' Donuts coffee is my favorite. So I've drank my coffee at home. Now I'm going to go drive through and get me some more on my way to work. You know, so all of those things that everyone uses, not just people with disabilities. So this is something that we all do, and really thinking about how do we surround the person with a disability with all of these types of supports to make them the most successful. Very rarely is there one answer to a problem. So usually, you know, it's a multitude of things that you have to put in place to be successful. And so that's what this is thinking about what are all of those things that you can put in place to make you successful. So you can use the STAR, again, in lots of different ways, just like the trajectory. You can use it for problem solving, brainstorming, you know, if there's a certain outcome that you want. And so like initially when I very first did this, I put Mikayla in the center of the STAR right here. I just put her, and I just wanted to see what are all those things that I have that surround her. You know, what are all those supports and things that we have in place? And so, you know, I started listing all of her personal strengths and assets, her level of independence, her feistiness, her ability to problem solve, her how to use her own body, you know, all of those kinds of things that really she was really good at and really brought to the table. But then the relationships, I started listing who are all those relationships that are important to her, those people in her life that are important to her. So friends and family. And at the time when I did this, I even listed her grief therapist, because after my son Joe died, her and I went and saw a grief therapist for about a year or so, year and a half. And so, you know, that could be an eligibility specific support, but for Mikayla, that was really a relationship that was important to her. So I put that in the relationships piece. So I tell you that because there's no really right or wrong way to do any of this. You do what makes sense for you and for your situation. And so then in technology, I was able to list things like, you know, her communication device, her iPad, how well, you know, I even listed like YouTube apps that it's amazing how she can get through and find exactly what it is she wants. And her wheelchair, I listed her wheelchair that, you know, we use when she, like I said, she can walk, but not long distances, you know. So what are those technology pieces that we have in place, whether that's very complicated, like a communication device, or very basic, like a YouTube app. You can start thinking of what are all those technology pieces. And then eligibility specific, you know, I was able to list her waiver, special education, Medicaid, even our private health insurance, you know, that we get because of being employed, you know, she has access to that. So, you know, listing all of those things. And then community-based is where I started listing all of the things that she was involved in. So I listed, you know, adaptive swim. At the time she was doing adaptive swim. She was doing challenger baseball. She was part of an adaptive dance group. And so, but as I started listing all of these things, I realized that she was only in quote unquote special programs. And so when you think about that trajectory and those things that I wanted for her and those experiences that I seen of how to get there, I had very specifically said I didn't want her only in special programs. And then when I went to do the STAR, I realized she was only in special programs. So it helped me to kind of see, and so we continued to do those things. Those things weren't bad. They were really great programs. But it helped me to see that I was missing something and that I didn't even realize I was doing. And so, you know, I started signing her up for other things, you know, Girl Scouts, the school basketball team, you know, again, and some of those things were successful, some of those things were not, but it was okay because we all learn and fail that way. So anyway, so you can use it that way, very broad. You can use it to kind of think about a specific problem that you want to solve and how do we get there. You know, one other example I can use for Mikayla real quick is couple years ago in a case conference at her school. We were sitting there and her teacher says to me, now I know one of the things that's really important to you about school is that she makes friends and kind of builds this sense of community. Because I'm always saying, you know, her school is her community, and you know, we learn so much from our peers and our teachers, and you know, that social interaction, how to deal with authority figures, you know, all of those kinds of things. And so she said, I know that's, you know, a big part of what you want from her school. And so I have to tell you that so the teacher said, so I have to tell you that the other kids in the class, while they are nice to her and they'll say hi to her, they don't really engage her. And so I said, okay. And I had done this long enough that I was already kind of thinking in these ways of this integrated supports and all of these things. And so I said, okay, so what are we doing to kind of help facilitate that? Because she does have significant communication delays. She does have this automatic no response. Anytime you ask her anything, she always says no right away. And so, you know, some of that's just kind of getting to know her. And so I said, okay, so what are we doing to facilitate that? And so I was able to think about in this way. So personal strengths and assets. I said, you know, she's got a really great sense of humor. She's really funny. You know, how are we using that to help her connect to her peers? And relationships. I know there was one kid in her class who she had been in the same class with since preschool. And so it had been a few years, and they were, you know, they always hugged each other when they seen each other. And so I said, how are we using that kiddo to bridge that gap with the other kids? And then technology, how are we using her communication device to maybe help her kind of interact and communicate a little better? And then community-based, I said, so what are some kind of school programs or extracurricular activities that I could sign her up with that would help to build and facilitate some of those relationships? And then eligibility specific, I said, well, maybe we need to talk about, do we need to increase her speech hours just a little bit to make her a little more proficient with that communication device so that she can actively interact with her peers and in the classroom and even during lessons. And so I use that as a problem solving way to say, okay, so yes, that's a problem. And how do we deal with that? What are all of these things we can put in place? Because not one of those things that we did was going to be successful by itself. We really needed to put all of those things in place to help her be successful. So what I've done is I've kind of broken down the STAR in the different areas. And with just an example, I have e-learning here that I actually had put together in March when we all kind of got thrown in into e-learning. If you had a child who was school-aged or just from COVID, you know, that we had to kind of quarantine ourselves. So I've done this one, and it's just a quick example. I won't read all of these to you, but it's just a quick example of how you can use the STAR for different things. So, you know, e-learning is the example. So personal strengths and assets. So really thinking about what is that student or child, what are their strengths that you can build upon to make them a more successful e-learning, and what is it that you as a parent or a household can put into place. So, you know, things like having a dedicated space, you know, creating a routine, you know, all of using your siblings. Does the child have siblings, older siblings that you can use to model and, you know, mentor some of that e-learning? So really kind of thinking about that. And then when you go to relationships, through e-learning, how are we using all of these people that we would have had access to in the school environment? So, or even outside of the school environment, but are there family members or friends who can kind of help? Because, you know, kids don't always respond well to mom when it comes to e-learning. And I know that firsthand. We struggled with it. But, you know, is there a family member or friend who can maybe take a subject or, you know, an area and just kind of help out with some of that? How are you staying connected to classmates or school club members or teammates, you know, whether that's virtually or, you know, phone or text or video conferencing? And then your teachers and therapists and instructional assistants, excuse me, how are we staying connected with them? Because, knowing that we're going to eventually go back into the classroom, that relationship with the IAs are important. And so how are we kind of fostering and still maintaining contact with those individuals and those therapists so that when we go back to school, we haven't really missed a beat as far as that relationship goes, that's still there. And then technology, some simple things, we used Seesaw and Class Dojo and, for the teachers to communicate to us, but also thinking about, how some of those things that you already have in your house, like Alexa and Google, if there's a certain subject that that you guys are covering through e-learning, can you say, hey, Alexa, tell me more about, and, just have some kind of random facts and, build off of that. There's a YouTube video for everything, and so is your kid really into YouTube, and can you use that to get them better engaged? But also thinking about what are those things that they had at school that maybe you need to get access to at home. So any kind of communication device, visual hearing aids, screen readers, all of the headphones, those kinds of things. And then when you think about community-based for e-learning, this one you missed out on things like art and PE and music. So, how can we still do those things in a way that uses our neighborhood or uses the local state park or, those kinds of things. So virtual field trips, there were tons of virtual field trips that you could take. And I suspect that this fall, with school being such a hodgepodge of how people are going back and the unknowns and everybody's doing things a little differently, there's still going to be a lot of these things that are available. Virtual read alouds and virtual art museum tours and, those kinds of things, but also, going for nature walks where you're looking for certain types of leaves and, using that as a lesson, rock painting. And there's just lots of things that you could do in your house or in your neighborhood that kind of still be able to do some of that type of learning that they were missing out on. And then thinking about eligibility specific, so those things that were or are accessible to you through telehealth, Department of Education resources. So some of those resources were for all students, not just special education students. But then also looking at how are we accessing special education services. In data or patents is the assistive technology organizations that can kind of help you with equipment, specialized equipment that you may need for technology. And then for those individuals who are transitioned to adulthood age using, vocational rehabilitation or pre-ed services that are still kind of working on some of those employability skills while you are still being quarantined or, staying at home. So there are lots of tools out there. So the tools that I went through is the Integrated Support Star and the Trajectory. And so you'll see here, this piece right here is the portfolio, which is one of my favorites as well, because on the portfolio, you can fill out a star that you like and a trajectory that you like, but on the front page is also kind of that about me section. So it's what people like and admire about me, how to best support me, what's important to me. And so what's really great is you can put some information in there that no matter who picks that up and how they work with them, they know kind of more about that individual in a more personal way. So, for Mikayla, she loves her baby dolls. So when what's important to me, I've listed her baby dolls because she doesn't go anywhere without a baby. So you let her pick which baby she wants to take that day, and so, but it helps those people who work with her to kind of know those little details, how to best support me. They know things like give her a 5-minute warning. Otherwise she's not going to do it, and so giving them those kind of tips and tricks that really kind of make everyone's day more successful. and also starts it off on a strength-based note. And because you want people to know all the great things about you, right? And all the great things about your kid. And it gives them a better picture of how to interact, how to engage them if they know all of these things. There's also what's called the supported decision-making tool. This is a really great one for that transition to adulthood age or adulthood age. I would say even, you could start looking at it as a school-age child, because what it does is it breaks down what are the things that everyone kind of might need support with in the different life domains. And then it has where you can check it that I need full support, I need a little support, or I need someone to make that decision for me. And so what's nice is that, for one, you can kind of see where are some areas that you might need to build upon or practice with. But it also helps you to think about things in a way that we all use supports in different parts of our life. So I still call my mother and ask for advice, and that's okay. And so really, being able to kind of put this in here and think about it in a way of who are those people that are helping support them, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't do it themselves. It just means that they value and will find benefit from other people's opinions to kind of help guide them. So then there's also lots of different resources that are available on there. They have some videos, which are really great to watch. They have the Life Stage 4 pagers are one of my favorites, because what it does is it breaks it down by life stage, obviously, and then it talks about each of those life domains and things you should be thinking about at that time of your life. And so it really is a good prompt and a good way to kind of check, like, am I thinking about all the things that we could be doing and preparing for that next stage in our life. There's also, some of these like exploring different options. And so it will, like exploring life possibilities. So it will talk about, and it's just meant to kind of be, to kind of start some ideas and conversations about what are some traditional disability options in these different life domains, but also what are some more innovative options that we haven't necessarily thought about that we can be putting into place. So really, what's important with the life course is that it's really about the thinking. So the tools are just a piece of the puzzle to kind of help you get there, but it's really about how do we think about, talk about, support people with disabilities, and how are we really empowering them and uplifting them to live their best life, of what they have decided is their best life. So we only have a couple of minutes left. I've talked a lot, but if there are any questions, concerns, thoughts, now would be a good time.
Hey, Heather, I've got a question. So I love the life course framework. I think that it's phenomenal, and I love all of those tools and resources. Can you tell me a little bit about what we as parents and family members should expect as far as like interaction with our waiver case managers and how they should be utilizing the life course tools?
Absolutely. So, so our waiver case managers and providers have all had received some training over a life course. Everything that we do is now written in the within the lens of the life course. And so for your waiver case manager and your waiver services, you have a PCISP, a person-centered individualized support plan. So you will notice that that PCISP is modeled after those life domains. So there's each section breaks it down into those life domains. And so the purpose of that is so you don't necessarily have to have a goal in every one of those life domains. Like, that's a lot of goals for some people. But what you should be is thinking about and talking about all those different areas of your life and what it is that you want and how do we kind of help get you there. And so And that conversation about how do we help get you there. So if daily life and employment, this is a very easy example, so I'm going to use it. You know, one of your visions for a good life is that you want to work in a restaurant. So, you know, if that's your vision of a good life, in daily life and employment, then we can start thinking about, okay, what are those things that can kind of help get you there? So they should be talking about, you know, what are the waiver services that are going to kind of help build the skills to get you there? What is it that we need? What are those skills that you need to get you there? Because, you know, you may have to start very basic. You know, working in a restaurant may be your goal, but you don't know how to follow a recipe, right? So maybe really your outcome is, I need to learn how to follow a recipe, which is going to eventually get me to my vision. And then what are those supports that I can put in place to get there? So whether that is a waiver service like a pack provider who's practicing doing recipes with you, but it can also be, you know, I'm going to do this, I'm going to participate in this cooking class, or, you know, I'm going to connect with, I'm going to use my technology that has a kind of step-by-step that I can click and go to the next step, you know, and so really thinking about what are all of those things you can be putting in place. So your case manager or your waiver provider may never use the words life course, and that's okay. That's not really, it's really about that conversation that they're having. And so it should be thinking about all those different areas and what are all those things we can put in place to help get you there. Does that help?
Yes, absolutely. Because I knew that those were conversations that our case managers were having, but I've never heard a case manager talk about the life course. So I was like,
Yeah. And some of them will use tools, some of them won't. I'm just doing this so that people will have the the website where we're talking.
Perfect.
So, you know, some of them will use the tools, some won't. They're not really required to, but it will, it does help if they do. But also know that you as a family member can come to them with the tools and say, I've done this tool, and you know, this really is your meeting, it's your services, it's your PCISP. So you really can drive the direction that goes. And so if you want to do more, don't be afraid to say, I want to do more. You know, and these are the things that I want, and how can you as a case manager help me, you know, get there?
Yes, and all of these tools are free, right? Our families can go to this website and have access to everything that you've talked about today.
Yeah, that is, yes. So one of the other reasons why I fell in love with Life Course, because I hate when there's all these great resources out there and you can't access them because you have to pay for them or whatever. They're all free, available for download. The tools now are fillable PDFs. If you want to just fill them out on the computer, you can, which is really nice. They just redid their website, and so it's really nice. You just got to kind of relearn it if you've been on there before. But yeah, you can print them, you can download them. The only thing, you know, University of Missouri, Kansas City, they just ask that, you know, you keep that piece on it that says, you know, it's a project of theirs. That's all you have to do.
That is excellent. I really like I like the idea of using this as a transition tool. You know, my daughter's only 8 right now, but I'm really excited about the thought of, you know, in middle school, pulling this out and starting to use it. And I'm excited to, like, my plan is to have her teachers fill out like the life trajectory worksheet with her, so that they're her opinions alone, and then kind of compare that to what my vision is. And that way I'm, you know, trying to merge those two visions.
Yeah,
Good life.
absolutely. So I love that that idea, and I encourage people to do that. Like, let that child have a part. You know, they may say, my good life means, if Mikayla could speak, her good life would include eating popsicles and watching YouTube all day, right?
I mean, what else is there?
14-year-old wouldn't, you know, say that, you know, so So, but it's a good way to kind of have a conversation starter. So, okay, you want to eat popsicles and you want to watch YouTube. So here are some things we got to kind of do so you can do these things, so you can also, use it as a motivator, as a kind of, setting the stage of, if this is what you want, this is the work that has to get us there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really great, to share with. I've shared them with family, I've shared them with staff, I've shared them with school, just so everybody's kind of on the same page. And they're very fluid documents, so things are going to change, and that's you may have started it, and 3 months later you're like, that's not even valid anymore. Like, I got to start all over. Or maybe 2 years later and you're like, yeah, this is still what we're doing, like we're still getting there. And that's just part of it. That's part of life, as plans and circumstances and situations change, and so we should allow that to happen too for our kiddos.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome. So feel free, anyone can always reach out to me anytime if you have some specific questions about, how to use Life Course in your life. If you want to talk more about how we use that at Beads or in your waiver services or with your case manager, I'm always happy to answer those questions and kind of help navigate that as well with you. So please don't ever hesitate to reach out to me at any time.
Thank you, Heather. It's been really informative. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for having me. Was there any other questions or anything that I could answer? No?
We had a couple in the chat box, like wanting to know where to access it and how much it was. So we addressed all those. Mark, did you have a question?
I'm okay. I just want to say thank you.
Oh, okay.
All right. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for spending your Tuesday lunch hour with us, and everybody take care, and I hope to see you for our last couple conference sessions on Thursday. So thank you.
Great.